If the pressure of a gas is increased, what happens to its volume? It decreases. What problem arises if the immune response is excessive? Autoimmune disease. Why are the gas giant planets located far from the Sun? Because of low temperatures and the solar wind. What is Jupiter's Great Red Spot? A massive storm. What technique demonstrates that the brain operates with electrical signals? Electroencephalography, EEG. Why do two facing mirrors produce an apparently infinite series of images? Because reflections repeat back and forth. What is the principle by which an image is magnified or reduced by a lens? Change in focal length. What physical property do both sound and light share? Wave properties. Which organ regulates the heart to maintain a steady heartbeat? The brain. Through what structure is the oxygen produced by photosynthesis released? Through stomata. If the Sun's gravity disappeared, what would happen to the planets? They would move in straight lines. Which brain structure controls unconscious reflexes? The medulla oblongata. What is the phenomenon called in which the shape of the moon changes? Lunar eclipse. What is the process called in which rocks are transformed by high temperature and pressure? Metamorphism. What are the large, dark, flat regions on the moon's surface called? Maria, lunar seas. According to Arrhenius, an acid is a substance that releases which ion when dissolved in water? Hydrogen ion, H. What is the process called that uses electrical energy to drive a chemical reaction? Electrolysis. Which group of elements is located at the far right of the periodic table? Noble gases. What particles carry electric current in an aqueous solution? Ions. Which element is represented by the chemical symbol H? Hydrogen. Which gas is a major cause of acid rain? Sulfur dioxide. What is used to neutralize an acid? Base. What is the common name for sodium chloride? Salt. What is the major constituent gas of Earth's atmosphere? Nitrogen. Which particles are responsible for metals conducting electricity well? Free electrons. Which organelle produces energy within the cell? Mitochondrion. Which blood cells are responsible for immune responses in the human body? White blood cells. What is the type of cell division that produces gametes in vertebrates? Meiosis. What is another name for a nerve cell? Neuron. What structures connect bones to bones in the human body? Ligaments. Which sensory organ contains the cochlea? Ear. What is the bead-like protein complex that is the basic unit of a chromosome called? Nucleosome. What is a representative plant hormone that promotes plant growth? Auxin. Which of Mendel's laws states that different traits are inherited independently? Law of independent assortment. Which greenhouse gas is produced by the combustion of fossil fuels? Carbon dioxide. What is the round crater-like feature found on the Moon's surface called? Crater. What type of energy is produced when electrons move? Electricity. What is the shock wave called that forms around an object moving faster than the speed of sound in air? Sonic boom. What is used to reduce friction between two objects? Lubricant. The buoyant force on an object submerged in a fluid is equal to what? The weight of the fluid displaced by the object. What type of wave is a sound wave? Longitudinal wave. How does electrostatic induction occur? Redistribution of charges when a charged object is brought near. In an electric circuit, what is the total resistance when resistors are connected in series? The sum of the individual resistances. What property of light is demonstrated by polarization? Transverse wave nature. What phenomenon does Bernoulli's principle describe? The relationship between fluid velocity and pressure. What determines the refractive index of light? The speed of light in the medium. To what is the force on a charged particle in an electric field proportional? The charge and the strength of the electric field. What is the accelerating expansion of the universe attributed to? Dark energy. What observational evidence supports the expansion of the universe? Redshift. What is the most abundant mineral in Earth's crust? Feldspar. In plate tectonics, where is new crust generated? Mid-ocean ridge. Which planet in the solar system has the fastest rotation? Jupiter. What scale is used to denote a star's brightness? Magnitude. What are the characteristics of a typhoon's eye? Clear and calm conditions. What is the layer of rapid temperature change with ocean depth called? Thermocline. Which planet in the solar system has the most moons? Saturn. What is the deepest trench in the world? The Mariana Trench. Which star is closest to Earth? The Sun. What is the process called when liquid water changes into a gas? Evaporation. What is a typical example where elastic force acts? A spring. What does Newton's first law of motion describe? The law of inertia. What is the phenomenon called when a solid changes directly into a gas? Sublimation. What causes the formation of fog? Condensation of water vapor. What causes Earth's magnetic field to form? The molten iron core inside Earth. Which experiment first demonstrated the interference of light? Young's double-slit experiment. Which elements exhibit magnetism? Iron, nickel, and cobalt. What is the core idea of the first law of thermodynamics? The law of conservation of energy. Which scientist first proposed an atomic model of atomic structure? Rutherford. Who first studied the dispersion of light? Newton. What is the main characteristic of the troposphere? Temperature decreases with increasing altitude. What is the main factor that determines the surface tension of a liquid? Intermolecular forces. In a pendulum's motion, what most affects the oscillation period? The length of the pendulum. In uniform circular motion, how is the direction of angular velocity oriented? Perpendicular to the axis of rotation. When throwing a ball to make it go farther, what should you change? The direction and magnitude of the applied force. What force causes a ball to bounce back after hitting the ground? Elastic force. Why does a stretched rubber band snap back when released? Because of stored elastic energy. If two equal forces act in opposite directions on an object, what happens to the object? It does not move. Which physical quantity determines the pitch of a sound? Frequency. What is absolutely necessary in a circuit for electricity to flow? A power source. What is the phenomenon in which a solid changes directly into a gas? Sublimation. What is the biggest difference between a liquid and a solid? Their shapes are different. What basic unit are cells in living organisms? The basic unit of living organisms. What function does the cell membrane perform? It controls the movement of substances in and out of the cell. Which structure is present only in plant cells and not in animal cells? Cell wall. Why can plant cells perform photosynthesis? Because they contain chloroplasts. What is a structure called that is formed by multiple cells performing similar functions? Tissue. What are the large units in which the Earth's crust moves? Tectonic plates. What representative landforms are mainly formed where continental and oceanic plates collide? Ocean trenches or fold mountains. What form of energy does a flashlight use to produce light? It converts electrical energy into light. What is the process called in which antibodies are produced against an antigen? An immune response. Why can life exist on Earth? Because of a suitable temperature and the presence of water. What functions does the cerebrum mainly perform? Higher cognitive functions such as thinking and memory. Which specific area of the brain first receives various sensory information such as vision, hearing, and touch? The cerebral sensory cortex. What functions does the nervous system perform in our body? It transmits signals and regulates responses. Where are stimuli received by sensory organs transmitted? To the central nervous system. What is a cell that senses stimuli called? A sensory receptor. Which central organs regulate responses to stimuli? The brain and the spinal cord. Which device serves as a robot's eyes? A camera or an optical sensor. What do muscles consume a lot of during exercise? Oxygen and glucose. What does a wearable device mean? A device worn on the body. What are the basic celestial components that make up a galaxy? Stars, gas, dust, and dark matter. Into which two major types are star clusters divided? Open clusters and globular clusters. Which type of friction decreases when an object begins to roll? Static friction. What is required to make the same object move faster? A greater force. What is needed to do more work? An increase in force and/or distance. Why does your voice sound different when you plug your ears? Bone conduction. Why does a train sound higher in pitch as it approaches? The Doppler effect. If a waveform is regular, what kind of sound does it produce? A pure tone. How can you determine the direction of the magnetic field around a wire? By using the right-hand rule. Under what condition does an electromagnet operate? Only when current is flowing. What are the bubbles formed when water boils? Water vapor. What kind of physical change is a change in the state of matter? A phase, state, change. What state change is fogging breath an example of? Condensation. Which seismic wave arrives first from an earthquake? The P wave, primary wave. For which life process in the atmosphere is carbon dioxide essential? Photosynthesis. Which cerebral region corresponds to the forehead area? Frontal lobe. What functions is the left hemisphere of the brain primarily responsible for? Language and analytical thinking. The ability of AI to read and understand text belongs to which technology? Natural language processing. What symptoms commonly appear from nerve damage? Motor or sensory abnormalities. What do the number of valence electrons affect? Chemical properties. Which atomic model describes electrons orbiting the nucleus? Bohr model. Why do emotions influence behavior? Because of neural signaling in the brain. What brain function should someone strengthen if they have difficulty regulating emotions? Frontal lobe control. Why do emotions lead to physical responses? Because of autonomic nervous system activity. What larger structure are galaxies grouped into? Galaxy cluster. Where are globular clusters mainly found? In the halo surrounding a galaxy. What is the name of the galaxy group that the Milky Way belongs to? Local group. Which is the largest galaxy in the local group? Andromeda Galaxy. What are the galaxy classification types based on their shapes? Spiral, elliptical, or regular. What is one way to make an electromagnet stronger? Increase the number of coil turns. Why do water droplets form on a cold cup when water vapor is present? Condensation. Why does a river change the landscape as it flows from mountains to the sea? Because of erosion and deposition processes. Why does the landscape change even in areas without earthquakes or volcanic activity? Because of weathering and erosion. Why can smart glasses display information? Because they have a built-in display. Why is reducing single-use items good for the environment? It reduces carbon emissions and waste. What device is installed in factories to reduce carbon dioxide? A carbon capture system. Why do plastics hinder carbon neutrality? Because they are made from petroleum. What resources does bioenergy utilize? Biological resources, biomass. Which organelle stores and uses energy for the organism? Mitochondria. Which planet in the solar system has the most moons? Jupiter. The reflex of pulling your hand away immediately after touching a hot object is an example of what? Spinal reflex. What two organs make up the central nervous system? Brain and spinal cord. What is the purpose of the heart pumping blood rapidly? To supply oxygen and nutrients. Which DNA base always pairs with adenine? Thymine. On which continent is the thickest continental crust located? Antarctica. What is the name for a deep coastal valley formed by melting glaciers? Fjord. What is the solid formed when cations and anions in an aqueous solution electrostatically combine and precipitate? Precipitate. What allelic combination is required for a recessive trait to be expressed? Two identical recessive alleles. In which layer of Earth's atmosphere is the ozone layer located? Stratosphere. Why is the angle of refraction larger than the angle of incidence when light passes from water to air? Difference in speed. What was the name of the first U.S. probe that landed on Mars for rover investigations? Pathfinder. What is the atmospheric boundary between the troposphere and the stratosphere called? Tropopause. Which precious metal has high electrical conductivity? Silver. Who first designed the reflecting telescope? Newton. What is the molten material found beneath Earth's surface called? Magma. Which Kuiper belt object in the solar system was reclassified as a dwarf planet? Pluto. What is the name of the British scientist who first discovered the electron? Thomson. In biological classification, what taxonomic rank is positioned above genus? Family. What is the abbreviation for average sea surface temperature used as an indicator of surface warming? SST. By roughly how many times does the reaction rate increase when temperature rises by 10 degrees Celsius? About twice. What is the SI base unit of luminous intensity? Candela. What is the overall process called in which rocks on Earth's surface are broken down and altered by water and air? Weathering. What type of rock is formed when pre-existing rocks are recrystallized under high temperature and pressure? Metamorphic rock. What is the lowest layer of Earth's atmosphere called? Troposphere. What phenomenon is represented by Jupiter's Great Red Spot? Vortex storm. What property does a solution have if it turns blue litmus paper red? Acidic. What does the ultraviolet protection factor, SPF, indicate? Multiplier of UVB protection time. Around what frequency in kilohertz is the human ear most sensitive? Approximately 3 kilohertz. Which greenhouse gas is most abundant in the atmosphere? Water vapor. Approximately how many days does it take the Moon to orbit the Earth once? Approximately 27.3 days. What 3 elements do plants need to perform photosynthesis? Light, water, and carbon dioxide. Which gas is the primary cause of global warming? Carbon dioxide. What are the 2 particles that make up an atomic nucleus? Protons and neutrons. What is the process in which a liquid's surface changes into gas called? Evaporation. How do temperature and pressure change as you go deeper into the Earth? Both increase. Which organisms are typical decomposers in ecosystems? Bacteria and fungi. What are the small openings located mostly on the underside of leaves where gas exchange occurs? Stomata. What is the force that acts between charged objects called? Electric force. What is the force that arises when 2 surfaces in contact resist relative motion? Friction. Who was the German scientist who first proposed the theory of continental drift? Alfred Wegener. Which nucleic acids are involved in genetic information replication and protein synthesis? DNA and RNA. What 3 factors affect the rate of a chemical reaction? Concentration, temperature, and catalysts. Where do parallel rays of light passing through a convex lens converge? Focal point. What is the process of breaking down organic matter to obtain energy needed for growth and reproduction? Cellular respiration. Where is digested food absorbed? Small intestine. Why can a cut on a finger heal over time? Cell division. Why do objects appear darker when wet? Light refraction by water. What principle does a nuclear power plant use? Energy from nuclear fission. If breathing is irregular, what effect does it have on exercise performance? Reduced endurance. How is aerobic exercise related to breathing? Requires continuous oxygen supply. What substance in the brain may be deficient when someone is depressed? Serotonin. What effect does positive emotional expression have on the brain? Increases secretion of happiness-related hormones. What can happen when galaxies collide? New star formation. Why are there many starbirths in galaxies with many stars? Because nebulae are abundant. What is the phenomenon called when iron exposed to air undergoes oxidation? Corrosion. Which plant cell organelle is primarily responsible for producing oxygen? Chloroplast. Between plant cells and animal cells, which has a cell wall? Plant cells. What is the property of an object that causes it to maintain its state of motion? Inertia. In a neutralization reaction, what product is formed besides water? Salt. What is the basic unit of sense organs that transmits stimuli to the nervous system? Receptor. Thanks for watching all the way through. Share your science knowledge in the comments. Your support helps us create even more science quizzes. See you in the next one.